The meeting room on Station Alpha 9 smelled of fear and desperation. Admiral Kethver's blue-scaled hands trembled as he reviewed the casualty reports for the third time. 3 expeditionary forces had been sent to Zarian 7 in the past year. 3 forces had been completely wiped out within days of landing on that cursed world. The Altarian High Command was running out of options and running out of time? The quantum crystals on Zarian 7 were essential for their faster-than-light communication networks. Without them, the entire galactic defense grid would collapse within months. But the planet had become a death trap that seemed to consume everything. They threw at it. Captain Jake Morrison sat across from the alien admiral, his weathered face showing no emotion as he listened to the briefing. Next to him, Commander Lisa Brooks took notes on her tablet, her brown eyes focused and alert. They were the only 2 humans on the station, representatives of Earth's growing but still minor role in galactic affairs. The Devourers are unlike anything we have encountered before, Admiral Kethver said, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. They exist partially outside normal spacetime. Our energy weapons pass through them harmlessly. Our shields provide no protection against their touch. They consume matter at the molecular level, turning our finest warriors into dust within seconds. The Admiral activated a holographic display showing the surface of Zarian 7. The planet looked like something from a nightmare. Twisted spires of black rock jutted from acid-green oceans. Lightning storms raged continuously across blood-red skies. The very air seemed to writhe and move with malevolent purpose. Beyond the Devourers, the planet itself is hostile to life, continued Dr. Velther, the Council's chief xenobiologist. His insect-like features clicked and twitched as he spoke. Gravity fluctuations occur without warning, crushing beings to paste in seconds. Acid storms can dissolve military-grade armor in minutes. The electromagnetic fields interfere with all known technology. It is, quite simply, a world that should not exist. Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. So why are you telling us this? Sounds like you need better equipment or different tactics? Admiral Kethver's scales shifted from blue to a darker purple, a sign of embarrassment among his species. We have tried everything. The Zelonian battle fleet was destroyed in 6 hours. The mechanized cores of Theta Prime lasted 3 days. The Scion Guard made it to day 7 before they were overwhelmed. Each force was equipped with the finest technology available, Dr. Velther added. Quantum armor, reality-anchored devices, dimensional phase cannons. Nothing works against the Devourers. They seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making conventional warfare impossible. Commander Brooks looked up from her tablet. You still haven't explained why you're briefing us? Earth doesn't have the kind of advanced technology you're talking about. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Admiral Kethver exchanged glances with Dr. Velther before speaking again. The Galactic Defense Council has made a decision. We need to try a different approach. Something unexpected that the Devourers might not be prepared for. You mean something primitive? Jake said, his voice flat. I mean something unpredictable, the Admiral replied. Human warfare is chaotic, emotional, and often illogical. These traits might prove useful against an enemy that seems to counter all rational approaches. Lisa Brooks felt a chill run down her spine. You want to use human soldiers as test subjects. We want to offer humanity a chance to prove itself on the galactic stage, Dr. Velther said smoothly. A successful mission on Zarian 7 would secure Earth's position in the galactic community for generations to come. Jake Morrison stood up abruptly. And if we refuse? Admiral Kethver's expression hardened. Earth's trade agreements are up for renewal next year. Your species has benefited greatly from access to galactic markets and technology. It would be unfortunate if those benefits were to disappear. The threat hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Earth's economy had become dependent on alien technology and trade routes. Losing access would devastate human civilization and set them back decades. How many soldiers would you need? Lisa asked quietly. A battalion should suffice, the Admiral replied. 500 volunteers should provide adequate data for analysis. Analysis of what? Jake's voice carried an edge of anger. Of how long humans can survive on Zarian 7, Dr. Velther said matter-of-factly. Previous forces have lasted between 18 hours and 7 days. We need to understand what makes the Devourers so effective so we can develop countermeasures. The room fell silent again. Jake Morrison stared at the holographic display of Zarian 7, watching the acid storms rage across its surface. 500 human lives to buy time for the aliens to figure out a real solution. It was a death sentence disguised as an opportunity. What equipment would we be provided? He asked finally. Standard infantry gear, Admiral Kethver replied. Personal armor, kinetic weapons, basic communication devices. Nothing too advanced that might interfere with our data collection. You mean nothing that might actually help us survive? Lisa said. The Devourers have proven resistant to all advanced technology, Dr. Velther explained. Simple weapons might prove more effective than complex ones. Jake Morrison looked at his companion. Lisa Brooks met his gaze and nodded slightly. They both understood what was really happening here. The aliens were using humans as expendable cannon fodder, hoping that human deaths might reveal some weakness in the Devourers that could be exploited later. We'll need to consult with Earth Command. Jake said, Of course, Admiral Kethver replied. But time is of the essence. The quantum crystal shortage is becoming critical. We need an answer within 72 hours. The meeting ended with cold formalities and false promises of cooperation. As the humans left the conference room, they passed through corridors filled with alien species from across the galaxy. Tall, graceful beings with crystalline skin walked alongside short, stocky creatures covered in protective shells. All of them looked at the humans with mixtures of pity and contempt. Back on Earth, the news of the deployment request caused an uproar in military circles. General Patricia Hayes, head of Earth Command, slammed her fist on the conference table during the emergency briefing. They want us to send 500 soldiers to die on an alien world so they can study the Badas afterward. It's not quite that simple, Jake Morrison replied via video link from the station. If we refuse, Earth loses its place in the galactic community. Our economy collapses. Our technology development stops. We become isolated again. And if we accept, we murder 500 of our own people. The general shot back. The debate raged for hours, but in the end, practical considerations won out. Earth needed the aliens more than the aliens needed Earth. The deployment would go forward, but it would be staffed entirely by volunteers who understood the risks. Colonel Ryan Davis stepped forward when the call for volunteers went out. A career soldier with 20 years of experience, he had seen action in conflicts across 3 continents. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, he told the assembled officers. Major Amy Foster volunteered next, followed by a steady stream of soldiers who understood that someone had to go. Within 48 hours, 500 volunteers had been selected from thousands of applicants. They were the best humanity had to offer, but they were being sent to die on a world that had already claimed the lives of 3 alien armies. As the transport ship prepared to depart for Zarian 7, Jake Morrison watched the volunteers board with a heavy heart. The aliens expected them to last maybe a week if they were lucky. But something deep in his gut told him that the Galactic Defense Council had made a serious mistake. They were about to learn that underestimating humanity was a dangerous game to play. The transport ship shuddered as it broke through Zarian 7's atmosphere. Colonel Ryan Davis gripped his harness tighter as the vessel bucked and rolled through the violent storm systems that surrounded the planet. Around him, 500 human soldiers sat in grim silence, their faces pale in the red emergency lighting. 30 seconds to drop zone, the alien pilot announced through the intercom. His voice carried no emotion, as if he were delivering cargo rather than living beings. To their deaths. Major Amy Foster checked her rifle one final time and looked across the cramped troop compartment. These were good soldiers, volunteers who had signed up knowing they might never see home again. Sergeant Nick Williams, a veteran from the Mars colonies, gave her a thumbs up from across the aisle. Corporal Kate Johnson, barely 22 years old, was praying quietly to herself, The drop bay doors opened with a mechanical grinding sound. Beyond them lay the surface of Zarian 7, a hellscape of twisted rock formations and bubbling acid pools. The sky above was a sickly green color, streaked, with lightning that seemed to move in impossible patterns. "Go! Go!" Colonel Davis shouted over the howling wind. The soldiers rappelled down into the nightmare world, their boots hitting the ground with soft thuds on the spongy surface. The very air seemed to burn their lungs, even through their filtered masks. Private Billy Thompson was the first to notice that his equipment readings were going crazy. His compass spun wildly and his radio crackled with static. "Stay together," Major Foster ordered through the COM system. "Establish a perimeter and wait for further orders." The alien transport ship disappeared into the storm clouds above, leaving the humans alone on the hostile world. Within minutes, the first signs of trouble appeared. The ground beneath their feet began to shift and writhe like living tissue. Sergeant Williams knelt down and touched the surface with his gloved hand. "This isn't rock," he called out. "It's some kind of organic material. It's warm." Before anyone could respond, the first devourer emerged from what looked like solid ground. The creature was unlike anything in human experience. It stood roughly 8 feet tall but seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Its body was a mass of writhing tentacles and teeth, but parts of it appeared to be missing, as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. Corporal Johnson raised her rifle and fired a burst of rounds at the creature. The bullets passed harmlessly through its body as if it were made of mist. The devourer turned its attention to her, and suddenly she began to scream. Her armor started to dissolve where the creature touched her, the metal turning to dust in seconds. "Fall back!" Davis shouted, but it was too late. 3 more devourers had emerged from the ground around them. Private Thompson tried to run, but one of the creatures phased through his protective gear and touched his arm. The limb simply disappeared, leaving behind a perfectly clean stump. The surviving soldiers scattered in all directions, their training forgotten in the face of an enemy that defied all logic. Energy weapons were useless. Explosives had no effect. Even flamethrowers seemed to pass through the creatures without causing damage. Sergeant Williams found himself cornered against a rock formation that pulsed with its own inner light. A devourer approached him slowly, its form shifting and changing as it moved. In desperation, he grabbed a chunk of the glowing rock and hurled it at the creature. The effect was immediate and shocking. The devourer recoiled as if struck by lightning, its form solidifying for a moment before it retreated into the ground. Williams stared at the rock in his hand, then at the spot where the creature had disappeared. "They don't like the local rocks," he called out over the radio. "Use the rocks as weapons." The surviving soldiers began picking up chunks of the strange stone, hurling them at any devourer that came near. The creatures seemed genuinely afraid of the material, backing away whenever it came close to them. But there was something else happening that none of the humans understood yet. Private Danny Walker, a mechanic from Detroit, had been assigned to the engineering squad. While his fellow soldiers fought for their lives, he noticed something strange about the devourers' behavior. They seemed to avoid areas where the humans were most afraid or angry. The creatures moved through spaces where soldiers were calm or resigned, but they circled around positions where someone was cursing or screaming in rage. "Hey, Major," Danny called out during a brief lull in the fighting. "I think these things are affected by our emotions somehow. They don't like it when we get mad." Major Foster was too busy coordinating the retreat to pay much attention to the observation. 3 squads had already been wiped out, and the remaining soldiers were scattered across a mile of hostile terrain. The acid storms were getting worse, and their equipment was failing piece by piece, but Danny's observation was correct. The devourers existed partially in psychic space, feeding on ordered thoughts and logical patterns. The chaotic nature of human emotions, especially strong negative emotions like fear and anger, created interference in their dimensional perception. It was like trying to see through static on a television screen. Staff Sergeant Tony Garcia had been separated from his unit during the initial attack. He found himself alone in a valley filled with the twisted remains of some alien forest. The trees were black and leafless, their branches reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. As he moved through the area, he felt a presence following him. The devourer that had been tracking him was larger than the others, its form more stable and defined. Garcia knew he was going to die, but he was determined to make the creature work. For it, he picked up a sharp piece of the local rock and turned to face his pursuer. "Come on, then," he growled, his voice filled with the rage of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Let's see what you've got." The devourer hesitated, its form flickering more rapidly than before. Garcia's anger was like a beacon in the psychic spectrum, creating waves of interference that made it difficult for the creature to maintain its dimensional stability. When he charged forward with his improvised weapon, the devourer actually backed away. Back at the main group, Colonel Davis was trying to establish some kind of defensive position. The soldiers had found a cluster of rock formations that seemed to provide some protection from the worst of the acid storms. More importantly, the rocks themselves appeared to have some kind of repelling effect on the devourers. "We need to figure out what makes these rocks special," Davis told Major Foster. "It's the only advantage we have." Corporal Beth Martinez, a geology student before she joined the military, was examining the strange stones. They were unlike anything she had ever seen, composed of materials that shouldn't exist according to human understanding of physics. They seemed to pulse with their own internal energy, and they felt warm to the touch even in the frigid air of Zarian 7. "Sir, I think these rocks are connected to the planet's dimensional instability," she reported. "They might be naturally occurring reality anchors? If the devourers exist in multiple dimensions, these stones could be interfering with their ability to phase in and out of our reality." The revelation came at a crucial moment. The surviving soldiers had discovered that their conventional weapons were useless, but they had found something that worked. The local rocks, when thrown with enough force and emotion, could actually harm the devourers. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the first day on Zarian 7 came to an end, the human force had been reduced from 500 to less than 300 survivors. By all rights, they should have been completely wiped out like the alien forces before them. But something was different about the humans. They were adapting. High above in orbit, Admiral Kethver monitored the situation with growing unease. The human casualties had been severe, but they had leveled off after the first few hours. The aliens had expected complete annihilation within a day. Instead, the humans were learning to fight back. "Perhaps we should extract the survivors," suggested Dr. Velther. "We have gathered significant data about devourer behavior." Admiral Kethver studied the tactical display showing the human positions. The survivors had formed a defensive perimeter around the rock formations and were actually holding their ground. It was unprecedented. "No," he said finally. "Let them continue. I want to see how long they can last." It was a decision he would come to regret. 3 weeks had passed since the humans landed on Zarian 7, and Colonel Ryan Davis was still alive. This fact surprised him more than anyone else. By all accounts, his force should have been wiped out days ago, just like the alien armies before them. Instead, they had not only survived, but actually begun to push back against the planet's horrors. The human base camp had grown from a desperate cluster of survivors, hiding behind rocks, to a proper fortified position. Private Danny Walker had proven to be a genius at working with the strange materials of Zarian 7. The former Detroit mechanic had figured out how to shape the reality anchor stones into walls and barriers that kept the devourers at bay. "The secret is not fighting the weird physics of this place," Danny explained to Major Amy Foster as he worked on expanding their perimeter. "You have to work with it. These stones want to bend reality, so we let them bend it in ways that help us instead of hurt us." The walls Danny had built looked impossible by human standards. They curved in directions that shouldn't exist and seemed to be larger on the inside than the outside, but they worked. The devourers couldn't phase through them, and the acid storms broke apart when they hit the barriers. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez had made an even more important discovery. The former Air Force pilot had been tracking the planet's gravity fluctuations for weeks, looking for patterns. What he found changed everything they knew about Zarian 7. The gravity changes aren't random, he reported to Colonel Davis during the morning briefing. They follow the planet's electromagnetic field. If you know how to read the signs, you can predict when and where the fluctuations will hit. Rodriguez had developed a system using simple compass readings and visual observation of the planets, auroral-like phenomena. When the lights in the sky shifted to certain colors, gravity would increase in specific areas. When they dimmed, the gravity would weaken, sometimes to the point where soldiers could jump 50 feet in a single bound. The knowledge had already saved dozens of lives. Sergeant Nick Williams had used Rodriguez's predictions to avoid a gravity spike that would have crushed his entire squad. Corporal Kate Johnson had learned to time her movements to take advantage of the low-gravity periods, allowing her to cross dangerous terrain that should have been impassable, but the most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Kelly Park had been studying the Devourers themselves, trying to understand how creatures that existed in multiple dimensions could be fought effectively. Her background in theoretical physics had given her insights that pure military training couldn't provide. They're not really monsters, she explained to the gathered squad leaders. They're more like antibodies. This planet is sick, and the Devourers are trying to clean out the infection. The problem is, they see all organized life as contamination. Park's theory explained why the creatures had been so effective against the alien armies. The aliens fought with logic, tactics, and coordinated strategies. To the Devourers, this represented exactly the kind of ordered thought patterns that needed to be eliminated. Human emotions and chaotic behavior, on the other hand, created static in their perception. So the madder we get, the harder we are for them to see, Williams summarized. Exactly, Park replied. But there's more to it than that. I think we can use their own nature against them. The sergeant had been experimenting with captured Devourer tissue, studying how it reacted to different stimuli. She discovered that the creatures were vulnerable to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, particularly the kind generated by human brain activity during intense emotional states. Captain Carl Mitchell's engineering corps had taken Park's research and run with it. The former construction foreman had always been good at building things, but on Zarian 7 he had become something approaching a master architect. His crews had learned to construct buildings that actually grew stronger when exposed to the planet's reality warping effects. The trick is to build with the chaos instead of against it, Mitchell explained as he supervised the construction of a new barracks. These materials want to do impossible things, we just have to give them the right framework to do it safely. The structures Mitchell's team created defied human understanding of engineering. Towers that should have collapsed under their own weight instead became more stable as they grew taller. Bridges that looked like they were made of twisted metal somehow supported vehicles weighing several tons. Storage facilities that appeared tiny from the outside contained enough space for weeks of supplies. That the human adaptation to Zarian 7 wasn't just technological. The soldiers themselves were changing in ways that should have been impossible. Private Billy Thompson, who had lost his arm to a devourer during the first attack, found that the wound was healing in strange ways. The missing limb was slowly regenerating, but the new tissue seemed to be partially composed of the same reality anchor material that made up the planet's stones. Dr. Rachel Stevens, the mission's medical officer, was documenting changes in all the survivors. Their reflexes were faster, their healing rates accelerated, and their resistance to the planet's hostile environment was increasing daily. Most remarkably, some soldiers were developing what could only be described as limited precognition. It's like the planet's quantum field is affecting our neural pathways, Stevens reported during one of her regular medical briefings. The same electromagnetic effects that create the gravity fluctuations seem to be enhancing human brain function in specific ways. Corporal Beth Martinez had become the first human to successfully predict a devourer attack before it happened. She described it as a feeling of wrongness in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. Using her early warning system, her squad had been able to ambush 3 separate devourer hunting parties, The most disturbing development from the aliens' perspective came when the humans began to communicate with Zarian 7's other inhabitants. The planet wasn't completely dead. Hidden in deep caverns and underground networks were creatures that had survived the Devourer infestation by developing their own reality-anchoring abilities. These beings looked like enormous crystalline spiders. Their bodies composed of the same material as the reality anchor stones. They had been hiding from the Devourers for centuries, too afraid to venture onto the surface. But the human presence had changed the balance of power on XER Ion-7. Major Tom Parker, a former diplomat before joining the military, made first contact with the spider creatures during a routine patrol. The beings communicated through vibrations in the planet's electromagnetic field, a language that the emotionally sensitive humans could actually understand with practice. "They're grateful," Parker reported after his first successful conversation with what appeared to be the creature's leader. "They've been trapped underground since the Devourers arrived. They want to help us fight back." The spider creatures brought with them knowledge of Zarian 7 that no alien survey had ever discovered. They knew the location of every Devourer nest, every unstable reality zone, and every cache of quantum crystals on the planet. More importantly, they knew the Devourer's weaknesses. "The monsters can be killed," the spider leader had told Parker through electromagnetic pulses. "But it requires weapons that exist in the same dimensional space they do. Your people's emotions create such weapons naturally." High above in orbit, Admiral Kethver watched the human progress with growing alarm. The tactical displays showed human settlements spreading across areas that should have been uninhabitable. The casualty reports had not just leveled off, but had actually begun to reverse as wounded soldiers healed faster than they were being injured. "Perhaps we should consider extraction," Dr. Velther suggested during their daily briefing. "The humans have provided valuable data about Devourer behavior. There's no need to risk further losses." Admiral Kethver studied the readings from the planet's surface. The quantum crystal mining operations that had been impossible for months were now showing signs of activity. The humans weren't just surviving on Zarian 7, they were making it productive. No extraction, he decided. Let them continue their work, but begin monitoring their communications more closely. "I want to know exactly what they're doing down there." Dr. Velther's insect-like features twitched with concern. "Sir, the humans appear to be adapting to the planet's conditions at an unprecedented rate. Some of the readings we're getting from their biomonitors are off the charts. They're changing in ways we don't understand." "All the more reason to study them," the Admiral replied. "We need to understand what makes them so resilient. That knowledge could be valuable for future operations." But deep down, Admiral Kethver was beginning to suspect that sending humans to Zarian 7 had been a terrible mistake. The planet that had destroyed 3 alien armies was being tamed by a species the Galactic Council had considered primitive. Worse yet, the humans seemed to be enjoying the challenge. The nightmare planet was becoming less of a nightmare every day, and that terrified the aliens more than the Devourers ever had. 2 months into the mission, Sergeant Chris Anderson was laughing as he chased a Devourer through a maze of twisted reality. The creature that had once terrified entire alien armies was now running from a human soldier who treated the hunt like a game. Anderson's squad had taken to calling these expeditions safari runs, and they kept score of who could track down the most creatures in a single day. The Devourer tried to phase through a wall of crystalline rock, but Anderson had learned to predict its movements. He threw a chunk of reality anchor stone with perfect accuracy, striking the creature as it attempted to shift dimensions. The beast solidified for a moment, long enough for Anderson to finish it off with his modified rifle. "That's number 12 for this week," he called out to Corporal Julie Barnes, who was tracking another Devourer on the far side of the canyon. "You're falling behind, Barnes." Barnes grinned and raised her weapon. The creatures that had once seemed invincible were now prey to human hunters who understood their weaknesses better than they understood themselves. The Devourers existed in multiple dimensions, but humans existed in a state of emotional chaos that created interference in every dimension, simultaneously. Private Mike Collins had developed his own hunting technique that involved deliberately making himself angry before engaging the creatures. He would think about everything that had ever gone wrong in his life, building up a rage that made him nearly invisible to devour senses. Then he would strike with weapons charged by his own electromagnetic field. "The madder I get, the deader they get," Collins explained to the newer soldiers who had arrived on the second transport. "It's all about emotional intensity. Fear works too, but anger is more fun." The second transport had been Admiral Kethver's attempt to reinforce the human mission before extracting them. Instead, the fresh troops had been absorbed into a force that no longer resembled a standard military unit. The original survivors had become something new, something adapted to conditions that would kill normal humans in minutes. Major Tom Parker had established formal diplomatic relations with the crystalline spider creatures who called themselves the Anchored Ones. These beings had been the original inhabitants of Zarian 7 before the Devourers arrived, and they possessed knowledge that made human adaptation even faster. "The crystal spiders have been teaching us about the quantum fields," Parker reported to Colonel Davis during their weekly briefing. "Turns out the whole planet is like a massive reality manipulation device. The Devourers were using it to reshape space-time in their favor, but we can use it too." The Anchored Ones had revealed that Zarian 7's quantum crystals responded to conscious thought, amplifying the natural abilities of any being capable of chaotic thinking. Ordered, logical minds, like those of most alien species, were filtered out by the planet's systems. But human minds, with their emotional instability and creative chaos, were perfectly suited to interface with the crystals. Corporal Beth Martinez had been the first to successfully bond with one of the large crystal formations near the base. The process involved placing her hands on the crystal surface and letting her emotions flow freely while thinking about what she wanted to accomplish. The results had been spectacular and terrifying. Martinez could now predict Devourer movements hours in advance. She could sense weak points in the planet's reality structure and guide her squad through areas that would crush or disintegrate other beings. Most remarkably, she had begun to develop limited control over local gravity fields. "It's like the planet wants us to succeed," she explained to Dr. Rachel Stevens during one of their regular medical evaluations. "The crystals aren't just tools, they're partners. They respond to what we need, not just what we want." Stevens had been documenting the changes in the human soldiers with growing amazement and concern. The troops who had been on Zarian 7 longest were developing abilities that defied human biology. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, resistance to radiation and toxic environments, and most disturbing of all, limited reality manipulation. Private Danny Walker had learned to reshape matter at the molecular level simply by wanting it to change. He could turn acid into water, transform twisted metal into useful tools, and even repair damaged equipment by thinking about how it should work. His abilities had made him invaluable to the engineering teams, but they also raised questions about what the humans were becoming. "We're evolving," Stevens reported in her classified medical logs. "Not over generations, but over weeks and months. The quantum field exposure is accelerating human development in ways that shouldn't be possible. We're becoming something more than human." The Anchored Ones had warned Parker about this process. According to their legends, the same thing had happened to their own species long ago. They had been simple stone creatures before the planets. Quantum fields transformed them into beings capable of anchoring reality itself. The process had taken thousands of years for them, but humans were changing much faster. Captain Carl Mitchell's construction crews had built a city that shouldn't exist. The human settlement on Zarian 7 now covered several square miles of previously uninhabitable terrain. Buildings grew directly from the planet's surface, their walls composed of living crystal that repaired itself when damaged and expanded when more space was needed. The quantum crystal mining operations were running at efficiency levels that amazed even the humans. The crystals seemed to want to be harvested, growing larger and more pure when human workers approached them. Teams led by Sergeant Kelly Park had established mining sites that produced more crystals in a day than alien crews. had managed in months. "The planet is cooperating with us," Park reported to Colonel Davis. "It's like Zarian 7 recognizes us as its proper caretakers. The Devourers were a contamination, and we're the cure." The Devourer population had been reduced to scattered packs, hiding in the deep caverns where the quantum fields were weakest. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez led regular hunting expeditions into these areas, using his enhanced ability to predict gravity fluctuations to navigate spaces that would trap or kill other beings. But the most significant development was the arrival of human families on the third transport. Colonel Davis had requested permission to establish a permanent colony, and to his surprise, Earth Command had approved the request. Wives, husbands, and children of the original soldiers were arriving to join the settlement. The alien response to this development was immediate and panicked. Admiral Kethver called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Defense Council as soon as the civilian transport was detected approaching Zarian 7. "The humans are establishing a permanent presence on the planet," he reported to the assembled alien leaders. "They're bringing non-military personnel, including children, to a world that destroyed 3 of our finest armies." The council chamber erupted in concerned chatter. Representative Zeftai of the Crystalline Hegemony spoke first. "This cannot be allowed. Zarian 7 is too dangerous for civilian populations. The humans must be ordered to evacuate immediately." "We tried issuing orders," Admiral Kethver replied grimly. "They politely declined to comply. According to their interpretation of galactic law, Zarian 7 is now human territory by right of successful colonization." Dr. Velther-S. report was even more disturbing. "Our analysis of the human bio readings shows unprecedented adaptation rates. They're developing abilities that rival those of our most advanced species. Some individuals appear to be manipulating quantum fields directly through conscious thought." The implications were staggering. A species that the Galactic Council had considered primitive was not only surviving on the most hostile world in known space, but thriving there. Worse yet, they were developing capabilities that could make them a threat to every other species in the galaxy. "What are our options?" asked Chancellor Mordick of the Central Worlds Alliance. "Limited," Admiral Kethver admitted. "Military action against the human colony would be considered an act of war against Earth. Economic sanctions would be ineffective since they're now self-sufficient on Zarian 7. And frankly, I'm not certain our weapons would be effective against beings who can manipulate reality directly." The Council fell silent as the implications sank in. They had sent humans to Zarian 7 expecting them to die quickly and provide useful data about the Devourers. Instead, they had created a human stronghold on a planet rich in quantum crystals, populated by individuals developing supernatural abilities on the planet's surface. Human children played in gravity wells that would have crushed alien adults. They laughed as they chased crystalline butterflies through acid rain that their enhanced biology could easily handle. The Nightmare Planet had become a playground for a species that thrived on impossible challenges. Colonel Davis stood on the observation deck of the main settlement, watching human families adapt to their new home with the same casual efficiency their soldiers had shown in combat. Children were already showing signs of enhanced abilities, their young minds even more adaptable to the quantum field exposure than their parents. "Sir," Major Foster approached with the latest reports from Earth Command. "They want to know if we need additional support or supplies." Davis smiled as he watched a group of children playing with tame crystal spiders that would have terrified most adult aliens. "Tell them we're doing just fine." 6 months after the deployment, Admiral Kethver's fleet arrived at Zarian 7 to find a world transformed beyond recognition. The planet that had been a nightmare of acid storms and dimensional horrors now gleamed with crystalline cities that seemed to grow directly from the surface. Human settlements spread across continents that should have been uninhabitable, connected by roads that bent space-time to make impossible distances seem short. The Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the sensor readings with disbelief. The Devourer population had dropped to less than 5% of original levels. The quantum crystal mines were operating at 300% efficiency compared to pre-infestation levels. Most disturbing of all, the human biosignatures were showing energy patterns that rivaled those of the most advanced alien species. "Request permission to come aboard," came a transmission from the planet's surface. The voice belonged to Captain Jake Morrison, but there was something different about it. The words seemed to carry harmonics that shouldn't exist in normal speech. "Permission granted," Admiral Kethver replied. Though every instinct told him this was a mistake, the transport that arrived at the flagship looked nothing like STANDARD human technology. It was grown rather than built, its hull composed of the same reality anchor crystal that made up Zarian 7's surface. The ship moved through space in ways that violated known physics. Arriving at the docking bay faster than its apparent speed should have allowed. Jake Morrison stepped out of the transport, and Admiral Kethver immediately understood that the human he had met 6 months ago no longer existed. Morrison's eyes held depths that seemed to extend into other dimensions. His skin had a subtle crystalline pattern that shifted and changed as he moved. Most unnervingly, reality seemed to bend slightly around him, as if space itself was adjusting to accommodate his presence. "Admiral," Morrison said with a smile that was both friendly and terrifying, "thank you for coming to check on us. We have so much to show you." The tour of human settlements that followed was like a journey through a fever dream. Children played in gravity pools that would have crushed adult aliens, their laughter echoing across impossible architecture. Teenagers rode tamed crystal spiders through acid rain that parted around them like a gentle breeze. Adults worked alongside creatures that had once been deadly devourers but now served as guardian animals. "How is this possible?" Dr. Velther whispered as they watched a human child casually reshape a chunk of metal into a toy spaceship through force of will alone. "Evolution," Morrison replied simply. "Zarian 7 doesn't change its inhabitants slowly over generations. It changes them quickly over months. We became what the planet needed us to become." Colonel Ryan Davis met them at the central mining facility, though, like Morrison, he bore little resemblance to the human who had landed 6 months earlier. His uniform seemed to be made of living crystal that responded to his thoughts, shifting color and pattern as his mood changed. When he gestured toward the mining operations, reality bent to show them views from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "The crystals want to be harvested," Davis explained as they watched human workers gather quantum crystals with their bare hands. "They grow faster and purer when we're around. It's like the planet recognizes us as its proper gardeners." The production figures were staggering. In 6 months, the human colony had extracted more quantum crystals than the previous alien operations had managed in decades. But more than that, they had discovered new varieties of crystals with properties that alien science had never imagined possible. Dr. Rachel Stevens, now serving as the colony's chief scientist, demonstrated some of these discoveries. Crystals that could store human consciousness, allowing communication across impossible distances. Crystals that could manipulate time, creating pockets where seconds stretched into hours. Crystals that responded to emotional states, amplifying human abilities beyond any known limits. "We've learned to work with the planet's quantum field," Stevens explained, her voice carrying harmonics that made the words seem to come from multiple sources at once. "Most alien species try to impose order on chaos. We learn to embrace the chaos and make it work for us." The anchored ones, the crystalline spider creatures, had become full partners in the human colony. Major Tom Parker, whose diplomatic abilities had been enhanced by quantum field exposure, served as the primary liaison between the species. The spiders had taught humans the deep secrets of Zarian 7, knowledge that allowed them to reshape reality on a planetary scale. "They've been waiting for us for thousands of years," Parker explained as a group of crystal spiders worked alongside human engineers to construct a new city district. Their legends spoke of chaos bringers who would come from the stars and help them reclaim their world from the shadow devourers. The few remaining devourers had been transformed rather than destroyed. Sergeant Kelly Park led Admiral Kethver to a facility where the creatures were being studied and rehabilitated. The beings that had once consumed matter indiscriminately now served as guardians and workers, their dimensional abilities harnessed for construction and defense. "They're not evil," Park explained as a formerly terrifying devourer gently tended to a garden of crystal flowers. "They were just confused. The quantum field exposure scrambled their perception of reality. We helped them remember what they used to be before the planet's systems were damaged." The revelation was staggering. The Devourers had originally been Zarian 7's maintenance system, designed to prevent reality from becoming too stable and stagnant. When the planet's quantum fields had been damaged by some ancient catastrophe, the Devourers had become corrupted, seeing all organized life as a threat to be eliminated. Human emotional chaos had served as a reset button for the planet's systems. Their unpredictable nature had allowed the quantum fields to rebalance themselves, returning the Devourers to their original programming and restoring Zarian 7 to its intended function as a reality manipulation. But the most disturbing revelation came when Admiral Kethver asked about expansion plans. Morrison's enhanced abilities allowed him to project his consciousness across space, showing the Admiral a view of human colonies on 17 other worlds that had been considered uninhabitable. "We've been busy," Morrison said with that unsettling smile. "Earth has been asking us to help with other problem planets. Worlds with impossible gravity, toxic atmospheres, predatory ecosystems, dimensional instabilities. We seem to have a talent for making hostile environments livable." The images showed human settlements thriving in conditions that would kill most known life forms. Families living comfortably on worlds where acid rain fell upward. Children playing games that involved manipulating local space-time. Adults working alongside creatures that alien science had classified as impossibly dangerous. "Your species offered us these challenges," Morrison continued. "We're grateful for the opportunity to prove ourselves. In fact, we're hoping you might have more difficult planets that need our attention." Admiral Kethver felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature control. The Galactic Council had intended to sacrifice 500 human soldiers to buy time for a real solution to the Zarian 7 problem. Instead, they had created a species of reality-manipulating colonists who viewed impossibly hostile worlds as pleasant vacation destinations. "We should discuss this with the Galactic Council," the Admiral said carefully. "Of course," Morrison agreed. "We're always happy to cooperate with our galactic neighbors. After all, we're all working toward the same goal of peace and prosperity throughout the galaxy." But there was something in Morrison's eyes that suggested the human definition of peace and prosperity might be very different from what the aliens had in mind. The man who stood before him could reshape reality with a thought, had turned the galaxy's most dangerous planet into a garden, and commanded the loyalty of creatures that had destroyed entire fleets. The return journey to the Galactic Council headquarters was conducted in tense silence. Admiral Kethver's crew monitored long-range sensors that showed human activity spreading across dozens of worlds that had been written off as uninhabitable. Each new colony represented not just successful terraforming, but the creation of more reality-manipulating humans whose abilities seemed to grow stronger with each generation. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most subdued in the organization's history. The assembled representatives listened in growing horror as Admiral Kethver delivered his report. The humans had not just survived their deployment to Zarian 7, they had conquered it, transformed it, and used it as a stepping stone to colonize worlds that no other species could even visit. "Recommendations?" asked Chancellor Mordick, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. "Complete capitulation," Admiral Kethver replied without hesitation. "We give humanity whatever they want, whenever they want it. We never threaten them again, never underestimate them again, and pray that they continue to view us as friends rather than obstacles." The Council voted unanimously to approve new trade agreements that gave humanity access to any world they wanted to colonize. They established a new classification system that marked certain planets as human pseudo-Blarether than uninhabitable. Most importantly, they issued formal apologies.